Hey guys, Josh Hammer here. I'm the host of The Josh Hammer Show and a syndicated columnist and Newsweek Senior Editor-at-Large. And also, as you can see over my shoulder here, the author of the brand new book, Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West, out March 18th. So make sure to pre-order it if you have not already done so. But for present purposes, it is probably perhaps most noteworthy that I'm also running for the World Zionist Congress as a delegate on the slate of Israel 365 Action. Yes, Israel 365 Action for all the American Jews watching this. That is the ticket that you're going to have to punch here with these elections that are starting this week and running for the next few weeks there. Make sure that you actually go ahead and vote for the Israel 365 Action delegation there. Look, Israel 365 Action, our platform is very simple there. We're not going to mess around with the so-called two-state solution, the two-state delusion there. We had a two-state solution. Isn't that what we had in Gaza basically since 2005? After Ariel Sharon's disastrous unilateral withdrawal, Israel said to the Palestinian Arabs, do your thing. Build a state. Build a Singapore on the Mediterranean, which was the common phrase at the time. And look what they did there. The so-called two-state solution ends on October 7th, 2023. That is the logical conclusion of the so-called two-state solution. The entire paradigm of land for peace is here, there, and everywhere a failure. In fact, the Abraham Accords, the remarkable peace agreements that President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were able to orchestrate during the first Trump administration, God willing, we'll see Saudi Arabia and others join the circle of peace. The entire purpose, the entire modus operandi of the Abraham Accords was not land for peace. It was actually not inside out in general. It was outside in. You embolden Israel. You go all in for U.S. Israel relations there. You strengthen those ties, and then maybe you make the Palestinian Arabs come begging for scraps at the table there. Israel 365 Action, though, at the World Zionist Congress, we're the slate that understands that. To use the popular phrase these days, guys, we're the slate that knows what time it is when it comes to the issue of Judea and Samaria, and that's Judea and Samaria, not the West Bank. We want full sovereignty over the Jewish people's historical and biblical homeland there. We're the MAGA movement, essentially, within World Zionist Congress there. We want to not just make America great again there, but when it comes to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, we want to make all of biblical Eretz Israel great again there. We're the only slate that is unapologetically going all in for Judea and Samaria, unapologetically going all in for the Jewish people's God-given biblical, historical, archaeologically indisputable right to all of the land of Israel there. So you really should go ahead and make sure to vote for Israel 365 Action there in the World Zionist Congress elections, which once again are starting this very week there. We're going to shake up the Jewish establishment, the failed status quo. So many of these liberal Jewish organizations, they're controlling the purse strings of up to $1 billion or more there. We are actually going to take that money and use it for the right causes. We're going to use it again for Judea and Samaria there, for strengthening Eretz Israel, for strengthening the MAGA movement there, for strengthening national, biblically undergirded national populism all throughout the Western world. That's what we stand for. And it's actually on that note that I am just delighted to be able to introduce to you who I believe you're going to hear from next. That would, of course, be the great Stephen K. Bannon. Steve Bannon is all in for U.S. Israel relations. He's all in for all the themes that I'm writing about in this book here, Israel and Civilization here, because Israel is the front line of Western civilization. I've been honored to get to know Steve a little bit over the past few years. I'm a semi-regular guest on his highly popular show, War Room. Always look forward to going on there with Steve there. So without further ado, here is Stephen K. Bannon.
Thank you for that great introduction by Josh Hammer. We've had Josh on the show many times, and people really love him because of, and not to put a tremendous knowledge of our Constitution, but also geostrategically. Look, I'm here to talk about, and I'm so proud in the first Trump administration to do the Abraham Accords, to move the embassy to Jerusalem, which I had recommended we actually do on day one. We got slowed down a little bit there, but eventually we got it done. And I see Israel 365 as the MAGA movement inside for the Jewish people and for Israel. What I want to talk about is the practicality of you winning, and it's going to get back to how we won in 2016, how we then won in 2020, and how we then won in 2024. And this is always a grassroots effort. It's very basic. It's about using human agency. You guys, if I look through the structure of this race, there is nothing to stop you from really running the tables in the U.S. vote. I mean, it's all out there. Your enthusiasm, your dedication, your love for the United States, and your love for Israel, to make sure that that what happens in the Middle East, all this madness. And tomorrow, I just heard that there's going to be a massive naval exercise between the Chinese Communist Party, the Russian Navy, in the Persian Navy, in the North Arabian Sea, in the Gulf of Oman. It just shows you the threat that's there all the time for Israel. And now you include the new threat that's coming from the cratering of Syria, at really the behest of Turkey. And you see the Qatar and what they're doing with the Muslim Brotherhood in Hamas, in Gaza. More than ever, you need people with absolute clarity that are having a voice particularly in the United States relationships with Israel, and is really the defender of Western civilization. So it's all in your hands to win. What you have to do, I think, is just get back to basics. I told Rabbi Walecki this, just get back to basics. It's really the personal connections you have that are eligible to vote in this election. If you use your agency, and it starts with like 5 or 10 people convincing them, hey, here's our message, here's why it's important, here's why we have to win. You do that and you just expand it out. And when I've looked at the numbers here, particularly of who's associated with Israel 365, there is nothing to hold you back from winning. I think today's the first day of voting. It goes on, I think, for a month or so. But there's nothing to stop you from winning. This gets back to how we won in 16. Remember, in 16, we basically had then candidate Trump. We had a plane. We had a message. We didn't have a lot of money. In fact, the people that really came in and supported us at the end and helped us get over the top were Sheldon Adelson, were Bernie Marcus, and the Mercers. They were really the 3 people that kind of came in and supported us at the end. The rest of it was all grassroots. In 2024, so much of the media turned against President Trump and that summer love. It was the same thing. It was really a grassroots effort. And then in 2024, it was an incredible grassroots effort that just kept expanding. That grassroots effort, that ability to connect and people to know about your knowledge of this, your support of what's going on, your support of the United States of America and Israel, I think can carry the day. And there's nothing to hold you back from winning, this 1/3 that's controlled, the votes controlled in the United States. And so what I told Rabbi is just that, hey, anything I can do to kind of spur you guys on to say, hey, look, this is achievable. This is all about your human agencies. Nothing can hold you back from victory here. And the victory, particularly in this very dark time, because President Trump's trying to stop the kinetic part of the Third World War every day, whether that's in the Ukraine or it's in the Middle East. And so everything you guys can do to support that, and I think Israel 365, by taking a major role in the World Zionist Congress, is exactly what's needed. So Rabbi Walecki, I hope that tells people what my support is for you guys. And I'm telling you, victory is at hand if you just maniacally focus. Remember, focus is power. If you focus on this in the next couple of weeks and just bring in people you're going to be shocked at how big a victory you're going to roll up.
Steve, that's a beautiful message. Can I just ask you one question before you go?
Sure.
This is a question I've been meaning to ask you for months. And even though we've spoken a lot, I've never asked you this question. You've mentioned many times that it was you wanted the embassy to be moved on day one of Trump's first term. And I remember you spoke about it when I had the honor of co-hosting War Room with you once, and you told the story about how you wanted to skip the parade, go right from the swearing in to moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And that's amazing to me. And I remember Ambassador Friedman then corroborated that. He said he remembered it on the top of your whiteboard for day one. And Gateway Pundit ran it as a story because it was such a cool thing that you wanted to do it first. But what's always I've wondered about is there's a lot of issues Stephen K. Bannon cares about. There's the border, there's the economy, there's the CCP. Of all the issues that you cared about, why did you want the opening act of the Trump administration to be the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem?
Because I think it cements and this is why later when we did the trip to Riyadh, to Jerusalem, to Rome, it cements the Judeo-Christian West. I mean, it would have been historic. It would have set his day of inauguration apart from every other inauguration day in the history of the country. And it would have cemented that we understand that we're the Judeo-Christian, we're the forebearers of the Judeo-Christian civilization, that it depends upon us, it's upon our shoulders. And it's a privilege to do that, but it's also a duty. And I said, look, let's skip the lunch. Go the parade so people don't freeze. When we get there, let's have a collection of people that we've worked with over the years. Let's sign the document that officially moves the embassy. And then you're going to go back up to Capitol Hill and you're going to have an address just to Congress to talk about what we're going to do in the first 100 days. And a lot of that is about bringing peace and order to the Middle East. In fact, you're going to announce this trip we're going to take in May. We're going to start in Riyadh, go to Jerusalem, and then go to Rome. And the Jerusalem part of it, just as a side that's never been reported, wanted to go to Masada. I thought it was very important to take President Trump to Masada. Now, we couldn't work it out for logistics reasons. Of course, at that time, the phony Russiagate thing was blowing up. So Reince and I had to return from Saudi Arabia to the United States. But no, it was all, and the reason it was important, it would have been historic. And the reason it was historic, it's driving a stake in the ground that we're the defenders of the Judeo-Christian West, and we're going to do everything we have to do, everything that's within our power to do to defend this great civilization that's been bequeathed to us.
Wow. Steve,
can I ask you a question, Steve?
Yes, sir, Rabbi.
You were so helpful when you came to our event in Dallas last week, and you got everybody really fired up and on their feet. There are Jews who are very, very, supportive of President Trump and everything that you're doing with him and the MAGA movement, and it hasn't been reported on as much as it should be. But you gave some really good advice to Rabbi Wielicki and myself the other day, and you said that this is just a classic, this election in the World Zionist Congress. So we're not we're a new party. There's a lot of parties that have been around for many, many years, and they're kind of in this entrenched position. The establishment, they have a lot of money. They get their budgets from the World Zionist Organization. And we're trying to do something new and disrupt this status quo. We don't have the same resources that they do. However, we have this passion. And what you said reminded me actually of what Jethro said to Moses in the Bible, right after Moses got the 10 commandments. And so he's now trying to teach the people the law, and it's an overwhelming responsibility. Jethro comes from the nations, right? He's not Jewish, but he comes in and he says, Moses, what you're doing is totally overwhelming, and you need a system in place. You need a hierarchy in place. And that's exactly what you said to Rabbi Wielicki and myself, that you need captains of 10, captains of 50, captains of 100, captains of 1,000. That's like your precinct strategy. And I thought that was, so wise. And so,
yeah. And this can happen. And remember, when President Trump, when we had the election stolen and he left Washington, D.C., I can tell you from the chat rooms and conversations, our audience, which is the hardest core of the Trump audience, was shattered. Because President Trump is somebody that was the first time they actually had a president who put them in the room in Washington, D.C., put them as a decision maker, and knowing how much work and knowing that we got 74 million votes, folks, I thought I did an incredible job in 16. It's 63.5 million votes. They got 74 million votes in 2020, just extraordinary. And to know they got that and it was stolen and there was nothing anybody could do about it, shattered people. And what we had to do is then go back to a strategy, like put a guide on into a hill when you've had a military defeat and say, this is our rally point. And what we're going to do is just go for it, and we're going to get organized. And we're going to get organized around precinct strategies, and it's groups of 10 and then groups of 50 and then groups of 100. Here, when Rabbi Tully and Wielicki showed me the structure of this, it's exactly the same thing. I mean, you guys can win this. This is within your human agency to win. If you don't win, it's because somehow we didn't get organized and then put forth the effort. But if you do it in the same enthusiasm, look, you guys got me jacked up on Saturday night. You know why? That's just a typical, MAGA audience. That's a bunch of Texans, right? The MAGA Texans that are there, that are fired up, as tough as boot leather, and not going to be defeated. If you take that energy and that toughness and that kind of Texas grit and do it at all the different locations you have throughout the United States, you guys are going to win. Of that, I have no doubt. As sure as the turning of the earth, if you put your efforts into this, and power is, focus is power over the next couple of weeks, you're going to have a shocking victory because it's right there within your grasp.
That's great. Rabbi Wielicki, unless you wanted to ask a question, I wanted to ask you, Steve, about the Judea and Samaria issue, right? Since 1967, Israel, made a historic mistake by not declaring sovereignty, not annexing the territory right away. And as a result, it's been this sort of no man's land. The media calls it the occupied territory or the West Bank. And we started an initiative about a year ago to get media, Jewish media and Christian media, to start referring to it as Judea and Samaria. And that's caught a lot of traction recently. And now there's a bill in the Knesset to declare sovereignty. There's actually something in Congress. Senator Tom Cotton and Claudia Tenney have bills recognizing Judea and Samaria. There's a lot more momentum now than ever before. I'm afraid that it's now or never. And if Israel, we have this, you have a strong government in Israel that's been fighting this war. You have a great administration in America that's extremely supportive of Israel. And, but a lot of people are still pushing this two-state solution. So can you just weigh in on the issue of Judea and Samaria right now?
Well, first off, for Judea and Samaria, this is what I call it, and the way I think about it, I think we need a much bigger education program, particularly among Christians and Catholics, just to understand, to make them connect back to their understanding of the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, and tie that to what we consider the Holy Land. I don't think we do a great job as Christians or Catholics of actually teaching the geography and understanding the geography of the
reality
Holy Land, the geography of Christ's life, of the birthplace of Christianity. And I think that's very important. If we do that, I think you're going to have overwhelming support, because I think it makes sense. It also makes sense geopolitically right now. You want a stronger Israel, particularly with what's happening in Persia, but particularly the threat to the Judeo-Christian West, I think, is coming from the north. I think it's coming from an empowered Turkey. Turkey concerns me, and I've said this for years now, that Erdogan is a man on a mission. That mission is to reestablish the Ottoman Empire, to reestablish the caliphate. And the way he gets the caliphate is kind of reverse everything that happened in World War I, right? Allenby coming to Jerusalem, Lawrence of Arabia uniting the Arab revolt, and really the two holy sites. And I think he's dead set on that. And if you look at it, it's not Israel's Jewish. Israel's just in the way. Israel is that outpost of the Judeo-Christian West that just happens to be in the middle of this, and they're going to get rolled up in it. And that's why I think it's more important than ever that we set the boundaries and embolden and have an empowered Israel and an empowered Israeli people. And I think this was the underpinning of the Abraham Accords. And I think it's one of the reasons the Abraham Accords have lasted through October 7th and everything that went on. The Gulf members, particularly UAE and Saudi Arabia, are both still hanging in there. And I think that's very, very important. I think now more than ever, we have to do those things that kind of solidify it. I think with President Trump, it's, I can tell you, not just a breath of fresh air. This is somebody that steps into these decisions. He owns these decisions. He's not trying to, there's no double talk. There's no shirking. And look, I don't agree with everything of President Trump. And I love Steve Witkoff. I wasn't exactly ecstatic when I heard the initial ceasefire, because I kept saying, hey, if you got to go through hell, let's go through quick as possible. But I understand their kind of wisdom in trying to pull this together, and we have to support them. But I think in particularly things in Judea or Samaria, we ought to be very bold, and we ought to do it now. And the more people, I would tell you, the more people get educated about this, the more allies we have. It's just like what's happened in Barnard over the last couple of days. And this is why, and I see Laura Loomer's, lighting it up today on social media. The biggest threat, one of the biggest threats to the American people, to Western civilization, the Jewish people, is this radical kind of neo-Marxism that ties together with the radical jihad. And up on Columbia campus in Barnard, it's not going to go away. I mean, President Trump went to an extraordinary thing of arresting, he's going to send this guy home today, which I think is a bold move that we need. But I keep telling people, those are ticking time bombs, and they have to be addressed. And we can't address it by putting our head in the sand. And that's why I think it's so important for Israel 365, which is essentially the MAGA movement, to basically take a commanding role into the World Zionist Congress, so that you have a platform on which to basically fight this fight for Western civilization.
Well, Steve, our platform issues, besides Judea and Samaria, is also more investment by the Zionist establishment, by the Jewish world, in a positive relationship with Christians and into education. And what you've just said ties together all of these issues and explains them better than anyone else can, that the Judea-Samaria issue and the relationship to Christians and educating people a Zionist message that resonates outside the Jewish world. This is the platform of Israel 365. And even though we hadn't discussed it fully with you, what the other items on the platform were, you intuited them, because the Judea-Samaria issue really is the linchpin to this whole thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time, Steve. Thanks for all the help.
I think in education, look, I've actually filmed at Auschwitz before in Birkenau, and I know that it's a program to bring young Jews and other people back to those camps, and it's incredibly powerful if you go. But I also think a program to bring Christian youth and Catholic youth to the Holy Land is a game changer. The more information and the more working together we have and hanging out together, the more people, the more powerful this becomes. And I strongly recommend that you guys do everything possible when you take over control of the World Zionist Conference, which we're going to do because you guys are going to win.
And like you said,
this
this is stage one. This is stage one. We have a lot to do, because when it comes to visiting Israel, so Jewish kids come to Israel. There's a program for that, and but the World Zionist Congress, when they help subsidize those trips, they don't bring trips into Judea and Samaria. They've really created this alternate reality where they're just waiting for the two-state solution to give it back to the Palestinians. And if they did that, there would be an October 7th all the time.
You tried that before. It didn't work. It's not going to work in the future. It's one nation geographically.
Yeah. And we're not just trying to win an election. We're building a movement. So, beyond this election, as Tuli said, as you said, Steve, the other day when we spoke, this is just stage one. We're building a movement. It'll also benefit the MAGA movement to have the Jewish MAGA movement part of it. And we're honored to be associated with it.
Well, I'm honored to be associated with you, and I can't wait to do more meetings and meetups like we did on Saturday night in Dallas a week ago. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Right. Thank you, Steve.